Well, thank you all for attending our October 12th Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Accessibility meeting. We have a full pack agenda today. Our agenda will include hearing from myself and Jay, and then we'll dive into what National Disability Employment Awareness Month is about, and then have some conversation with our newly appointed Director of Workforce at DDS, hear from a great presentation from a coffee house out of Greenwich called Coffee for Good, and then hear from our partners at DSS on Husky, Medicaid, and opportunities and how they support a disability population, as well as Walgreens, who's been doing some phenomenal work with this population for over 16 plus years. And then from a local entrepreneur and mother and parent who's been going through this process and developing resources to support her son, which is Imperfect by Pop. And then lastly, another amazing partner, state agency partner, is at BRS, who's doing some phenomenal work in building out career pathways and human services supports and integrated employment opportunities for this population. And then we'll close out and have any questions and Q&A for any of the panelists and so forth. So without any further ado, then I'll pass it off to Jay just to say a few words, and then we'll transition.
Thank you, Anthony. Good afternoon. It's good to see everyone. Thank you for your ongoing commitment to this very important work, particularly in light of our occasion to hear from some advocates and important stakeholders with respect to National Disability Month. Before we get started, just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge one of our colleagues, Tammy Exum, who sits on the Persons with Disability Subcommittee. As you're all very likely aware, Tammy unexpectedly, and Tammy and her sons unexpectedly lost her husband, Earl, and their father, Earl Exum, just a short time ago. And in acknowledging that, just want us to take a moment of silence, if we would, to continue to support Tammy and in reflection of Earl's contribution to the community. Thank you. So please continue to support Tammy in all ways that you can. The contributions that she has made as a legislature, the contributions that the family have made, and certainly Earl's contributions were evident by the turnout at the services and all of the attributes and tributes that have been ongoing since the tragic news of his passing. So we will continue to benefit from Earl's leadership and contribution and continuing to support Tammy. So we do have a very full agenda, an agenda that is, I think, reflective of the level of talent and commitment that we have on this committee. The work that you all do never is to be taken for granted. And we are so appreciative to be able to hear from experts. We've got an agenda laid out before us. We are going to be cognizant of your time and bring this to a close at the 3 p.m. hour. So that being said, after these comments, we'll be really helping to navigate this as Anthony leads us through the agenda. But we're starting off with Bill Hung, the Governor's Fellow in a Governor's office. So thank you again for everything that you have done. And Billy, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll get the agenda started.
That sounds good. Appreciate it, Jay. Really glad to be here with all of you today. I've created a small deck just to show what this month is all about with related to National Disability Employment Awareness Month. It is a mouthful, but every word in there is necessary as well. So let's get started. Can I share screen actually? I know I have two computers hooked up. And I think the one that I'm not on is the one that needs permission.
Can you provide that on the back end?
Anthony, you're still the co-host. So you're the host now, so you'll have to give him permission. All the power.
Anthony, the other knee, please. Sorry, it's very confusing.
Which one? Which one are you?
You got the wrong computer. The other me.
Let me find you.
Let me see.
There you go. You should be all set.
Oh, sweet. That
Okay.
works. Thanks so much. Apologies for the confusion. I have two machines hooked up. Really great to be here, everyone. As Anthony and Jay teed it up, my name is Billy. I was a governor's fellow with the Office of Workforce Strategy, recently transitioned into a senior policy advisor role. And my work at OWS is primarily around building out our legislative agenda and portfolio, along with work on our bonds as well. Although I work fairly diversely across all our verticals. And I do a lot of work here supporting Anthony in a lot of these really important DEIA efforts. So diving right into it, let's talk a little bit about October. So National Disability Employment Awareness Month is something that was started in 1945, so right around the close of World War II. And the goal really at that time was to get folks who were physically disabled back into the workforce. And over time, that definition has morphed and changed, and we really now realize, that it's really important to have folks, that are not just physically disabled. It covers the entire broad spectrum of developmental and intellectual disabilities as well. We have really important inclusive terms, including folks who are neurodivergent today, and that's really important. So there's been a lot of progress. This year is actually the 50th year and the seminal Rehab Act of 1973, which laid the groundwork for a lot of pushes in the workforce space for persons with disabilities. Just as a very quick note, I am also a person with a disability, so this work is also both professional and personal to me. In the 50 years since the Rehab Act, this is something that we continually grapple with. The issue of employment for persons with disabilities is really complicated and is nuanced based on perspective. It's based on the perspective of the person, it's based on the perspective of the employers at large, as well as the person's family, their loved ones. And over time, our understanding of disability has become a lot more nuanced as we really move from this medical model of, what are you physically able to do or not do, to a more social model of how can we actually maximize each of our value in society? How can we make society accessible to all of us? And so a lot of hiring practices and anti-discrimination policies that were set forth, as you can see, during the post-war period or, a couple of decades ago, still lags. The ADA itself, in many ways needs to be strengthened. So it's really great that we have this forum to discuss this. So just giving an overview of really employment, specifically for persons with disabilities. And this is just a screen grab from BLS, so the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's really three key stats that people focus in on when we talk about the labor market. We talk about labor force participation rate, which is really how many people are looking for a job in a given population. And so you have people who are looking, and then you have people who aren't. And what's really important to note here in this first metric, as you'll see with all the other metrics, and this is from 2022 data, is that if you look at the 16 to 64 age group, folks who are generally, more inclined to be in the labor market, you see that the participation rate is about, half for folks who have disabilities versus folks who do not. And that's really, really a key insight. It means that people who have disabilities are less likely to search for jobs, or they're not on the market. And there are factors that contribute to that. But then you also look, at the folks who have a job in that population. You could see something that's very similar as well. And this is another key metric in employment population ratio. So essentially, there's a lower proportion of those, who are seeking a job, and then, they have a job, compared to persons without disabilities. And what's also really important is that among the population that's out there looking for a job, persons with disabilities have higher unemployment rates. And what this means is that the folks who are out there looking for a job themselves are not able to find a job, or less likely to find a job relatively to persons without disabilities. So you can see that in this job funnel of searching for a job and then actually getting a job, persons with disabilities lag fairly behind persons without disabilities. So there is multi-stage and is something that at every stage needs to be addressed. So if you break it down, and this is just my own breakdown of this, and it's by no means prescriptive or anything. I mean, you can see at an individual level, there's challenges that persons with disabilities face, and then those challenges have effects. A lot of times, they don't have prior work experience, in part because they've been on Social Security for so long, and there's been disincentives, which I'll quickly cover in a little bit. So without that work experience, that excludes them from a lot of the job market, from options as well. Another key thing is that they may have access barriers, and a really easy example is transportation barriers. If you're in a wheelchair, in the middle of rural Eastern Connecticut, it might be hard for you to get to New Haven. And so this compounds even in the job search phase. And so it might lead to decreased motivations, for instance, to find jobs. And this is what a lot of folks often harp on, which is difficulties completing work duties, which do have merit. I think it's also really important, as we're switching this conversation, to be able to identify which jobs are really well suited to individuals. Everyone in many senses of the word is not disabled, but differently abled. So it's really important to consider that. And it's not just up to the individual. The problem is that it's environmental as well as societal. And there's a lot of stigmas. Too broad stigmas can occur in the hiring stage, where folks discriminate against those with disabilities. It could be it can't be overt because the ADA has anti-discrimination clauses against that, but it could be many folks discriminate all the time. And then even when a person with a disability gets to the workplace, they can continually be discriminated. Folks might not be, so happy if, accommodations are made for one person and not another. And so what this really leads to is, in the hiring funnel, it leads to increased difficulty in actually getting a job. And then within a workplace itself, it leads to a lack of upward career mobility. And for that person, and this is also, I forgot to add here, in addition to lack of psychological safety, it may be that, it's hard for folks who don't have disabilities to relate to those who do. So it's also hard to find things like mentorship, which is really, really important for job advancement. And so what I like to say here, and then, this will key it up nicely for Mary Pat at DDS, is really talk about, should persons with disabilities work? And it's a key and nuanced question here. There's a lot of incentives, and there's also a lot of disincentives. I'll talk about disincentives first, right? It's a very straight up is a benefits issue. The folks who often are disabled, they're usually on Social Security and also SSDI, which is disability insurance, and increased income or assets, what folks call substantial gainful activity, which isn't even that high. It's about $14.70 a month currently, can lead to the loss of these benefits. We often talk about the benefits cliff when we have that. In a similar vein, in terms of health benefits, which Guy will cover later on, Medicaid, for instance, you could lose that if you make too much money. And finally, there's possible discrimination in the labor market. So Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was also around the Depression era, a lot of the stuff was passed then, essentially allows for sub-minimum wage for persons with disabilities. And there's evidence out there from research now that this has indeed led to discrimination and a lack of upward career mobility, even if someone is able to perform at a high level. And so when we talk about, okay, why should people actually get into the labor market? I think, it's a lot harder to nail it down. Research has shown it improves economic self-sufficiency, and somehow that's kind of vague, right? Whether that's financial literacy, or ability to make financial decisions independently, it's hard to nail down. And there's a lot of studies that also show that when you lose your benefits, and you work under all these restrictions, you're really not making that much more. So there is a financial argument that is against that. And folks also say it promotes greater integration with the larger community and civic engagement. I think that's really important. I think it's important for psychological well-being for individuals. But again, this is something that, when folks in the business talk about, it's not very tangible. And finally, something also related to it is this idea of social competencies, both persons with disabilities and those who interact with them. But the way to really get at this question for many folks is really to look at the disincentives right now. And what you want to do is you want to decrease disincentives and increase incentives, right? So the first two solutions here that I've highlighted, piecemeal solutions, are this idea of ABLE accounts, which essentially allow you to accrue assets. So this allows you to, this was a recent act that was passed, I think 2014. So you can now make up to, put into these accounts $14,000. It's like a bank account. And there's an asset limit starting at 100,000. And so the idea is that those asset limits will not count against things like your benefits, like Social Security. And that's really important, right? It begins to allow people to have peace of mind that they can begin working and also maintain their benefits. Similarly, MedConnect is part of a Connecticut Medicaid program run out of DSS. And so the idea behind this is that persons with disabilities can now actually make up to $75,000 in income and not have that be counted against, a means-tested way of health insurance, of getting health insurance and Medicaid eligibility. And finally, the idea of supported employment, which is a huge umbrella term that talks about being able to create inclusive workplaces that allow persons with disabilities to, get a holistic set of resources, whether these are supportive services, assistance building resumes, life skills and whatnot, as they begin to transition into the workplace. So, there's no one size fits all. And I think today you'll hear a lot about the various perspectives of this. So I'm going to turn it back to Anthony and to tee it up for Mary Pat to talk about how agencies have been doing this for a very long time and what the public sector looks like. Thank you.
Hey, Anthony, I'm sorry. Can I interject here for a minute? Thank you, Billy. There was an inquiry, a very apropos inquiry, which is an acknowledgement of our own need to be aware and sensitive to the topic at hand. Are we able to activate a closed captioning function for this meeting? I know that it is a feature of Zoom, but I don't know if it requires us to activate it or set something up prior. If not, can we activate it? And if so, we certainly going forward need to make note of that as was raised in the chat. So I don't know, can we turn that on midstream, Anthony, or anybody who might know?
Yeah, I know when we set the recording, when we started recording, it said closed caption was enabled. And I think sometimes you have to click accept it on your PC, if but it will be uploaded in closed caption, but it is enabled. So typically when you first hit record, it gives you an option to, if you want to have it in closed caption, and if you might have not paid attention to it, but I don't know if we can actually have it launched again.
All right, so if we can, so it is enabled if there's a button to enable it for those that inquired, and if not, we will certainly make sure that is pointed out. I saw the recording, but I missed all the options for those that would benefit from that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Billy, for that was a great presentation. Very comprehensive, really holistic look at some of the challenges and where the opportunity lies. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Pat, who is new to the role as Director of Workforce at DDS. Mary's going to probably speak to Human Service Pipeline and some of the new opportunities that's presenting itself. Turn it over to you, Mary.
All right, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. See if this comes up.
And we're a little behind time, so I know we have to close a little bit of time too. So
okay, well, I could do that. All right. So, as an introduction, like Anthony said, my name is Mary Pat DiCarlo, and I have just recently started working for the Department of Developmental Services just about 7 weeks ago as the Director of Workforce Strategies. I have been in the IDD field for over 40 years in many different capacities, and always in the private sector. So working for the state is new for me. Learning a lot of different things in regards to what you can and can't do, which has been eye-opening to me. When I first looked to take this position, and when Commissioner Sheff was talking to me about it, DDS has recognized for some time now that the workforce shortage for the staff, or what we call direct support professionals, has been growing. And over the last several legislative sessions, the legislature has been good about, giving funding to increase the DSP's starting wage. However, we have not seen an increase in hiring or retention because of that. So along with work, I'm beginning to work with OWS now and a few other state agencies to see what it is that we can do to attract people to the healthcare field in regards to, direct support professionals. So my goals in this position are to take a close look at the workforce needs, specifically in the IDD sector, and specifically for the private providers, not necessarily, DDS themselves, although there will be some crossover. I want to look at developing initiatives to address those needs, trainings, and compensation. One of the things that I'm quickly learning is that, like I said, it's not always the money. And I don't think a lot of the staff, a lot of the DSPs are afforded the proper training. And if they don't feel like they're doing a good job, they're not going to stay committed to this field. Like I said before, collaborate with OWS on other state agencies to develop the Human Service Career Pipeline, which is part of House Bill 5001. Develop training opportunities for the underemployed and unemployed. And again, if and where that be people with disabilities, we need to really encourage that. And then we want to develop specific training designed for entry-level direct support positions, because the more and more I read, I see that DSP, direct support professionals, is not just for the IDD world. It is really across all human services. And if we could develop training and this entry-level position where then people could then, expand out, and if they like the medical side of it, they could go on to CNA, or if they like the behavioral side, they can go on to being a registered behavioral technician, etc. So those are the things that I'm looking to do, and I think some things have been done in the state, and DDS didn't necessarily participate in it, but that's going to change now, and we're going to work with everybody. So my contact information is here, if it'll come up. And my email, my cell phone number. Email is probably the best way to get a hold of me. If you have any questions, any ideas, that would be great.
All right. Thank you, Mary Pat. Mary Pat is new to the role, but I think part of it too that she's tasked with is also looking and doing a landscape analysis of where new opportunities lie for cross collaboration and adding innovation to the system. House Bill 5001, there's a lot of innovation that we need to be able to build in to really have a more universal approach to how we build the human service pipeline. So really exciting work over the next several years to really build this and flush out a really meaningful opportunity for this population. Next, Mary, if you probably can stop sharing quickly for me. Next, we have John Labarge from Coffee for Good, amazing nonprofit up in the Greenwich area that's going to present on Coffee for Good. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, can you see the on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me start up here. Okay, thank you, Anthony, and thank you for all the important work that you are doing and for the opportunity to talk to you today about Coffee for Good's approach to addressing employment for young adults with developmental disabilities. I am John LaBerge, Chairman of Coffee for Good's board, and with me on the call today are Alan Gunsberg and Helen Lebrano, who head up our inclusive employer team at Coffee for Good. As shown here, at Coffee for Good, we operate a coffee shop that's open to the public as a training platform to develop marketable skills and build self-confidence in our trainees. We started back in 2019, and in the midst of COVID, it took us a while to get all the necessary zoning approvals and outfit the coffee shop, but we finally opened for business in June of 2021 with an initial training cohort of 24 young adults with developmental disabilities. As shown in this slide, over the past 2.5 years, we have graduated 22 of our trainees into competitive integrated employment in our community and have accepted an additional 21 employees or 21 trainees into our program. Our program is funded primarily by coffee shop sales and thanks to the very loyal and growing customer base from the Greenwich community. We continue to fundraise, and as we establish a financial track record, we are hoping to attract more support from private foundations and government agencies for funding our programs in the future. On the expense side, it's important to note that we do compensate our trainees and staff at minimum wage or better. We feel that this is important in order to have our trainees take the program seriously and because a work ethic is an important part of their training. So compensation is of our trainees and staff makes up the biggest part of our expense budget. I should also mention that our paid staff is augmented by a very capable and generous set of volunteers who do everything from one-on-one coaching of our trainees, cooking and baking in our kitchen, to outreach to prospective employers, to transition coaching, to post-transition advocacy, as well as even accounting and operations. We wouldn't be where we are without all of their help. We have learned a lot in our first 2.5 years of operation. The development of commercial skills and self-confidence that were our initial goals in our trainees have been overwhelmingly successful. But just as important, we now realize that the time that we spend with these young adults has given us the opportunity to really get to know their skills, interests, and capabilities. We feel that this knowledge can be a significant benefit to potential employers in order to help them to design appropriate jobs that will result in win-win outcomes. We have also learned that our graduates and our employer partners need continuing support even after the transition into competitive employment in order to adjust to changing circumstances. We at Coffee for Good believe that we can help, and by so doing, achieve long-term success for our graduates and for our employer partners. With this knowledge, we are currently working on a more structured program as an enhancement to the work that is already being done by our inclusive employer team that Alan Gunsberg and Helen Lebrano co-chair. This program will identify and build a network of employers who are interested in welcoming the disabled into their workforce, perhaps not immediately, and perhaps they'll need some help on job design and supervision. But our employer partners acknowledge the benefits of diversity and inclusion and are willing to work together to create appropriate opportunities within their businesses. We will then work with these employer partners to characterize the types of positions that they currently have in their business, where our graduates with some accommodation might fit. For example, some of our graduates are great workers, but are more effective in roles where they are a helper to a more experienced employee, or where they work in parallel with others doing similar jobs. Others can work more independently or interface directly with customers. And still others might require more one-on-one coaching in order to be successful, or as their responsibilities change over time. With these characteristics of our employer partners' opportunities, and with our understanding of the skills, interests, and capabilities of our graduates, we will be able to match our graduates to one or more of our employer partners' positions. We then intend to sit down with our employer partners and with their supervisory staff to help them to design appropriate job responsibilities and supervision to accommodate our graduates' capabilities. This will be crucial as many employers, especially those in small retail shops who make up a large part of our employer partners network, might not have experience with disabled employees, and they just assume that they're getting a neurotypical entry-level employee. We understand this disconnect and are committed to helping our employer partners to bridge this gap. And finally, we intend to establish a specific transition plan for each of our trainees in transition, with observable milestones, defined responsibilities, and target completion dates in order to manage through the pre-transition, transition, and post-transition phases of placing our graduates into competitive integrated employment. This slide shows some of our transition successes to date, with Keogh's Hardware, the Maritime Aquarium, Honey Joe's, Eau de Lis, the Greenwich YMCA, and Gregory's Coffee. I should also add the Bruce Museum and Home Depot, who have recently hired two of our other graduates. So in conclusion, we have met many of our initial goals. Our coffee shop is up and running, is largely self-funding, and has gained a loyal following in the community. And our trainees have developed skills and self-confidence. We now want to expand our services to better support both our graduates and our employer partners in the design of appropriate job responsibilities and supervision that accommodate our graduates' skills, interests, and capabilities while reflecting the realities of our employer partners' businesses. We feel this collaborative approach is necessary to achieve long-term win-win-win outcomes for our grads, for our employer partners, and for Coffee for Good. And with that, if there are any questions, I don't know if we're holding questions until the end so that we catch up on our schedule, but I'm certainly willing to take any questions and try to answer them for you.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to probably hold any questions towards the end if we have time, but if you do have a question, just drop it in the chat. We are able to be responsive in the chat as well. But thank you, John. I think that was an amazing presentation. You guys are doing some phenomenal work. As I previously mentioned, can't wait to come visit and see the wonderful work in person. Next, we're going to pass it over to Guy Wilson's from
you got it. Yep.
Yep. Woolston, yep, from DSS, that he'd be able to speak to some of their efforts. And he's a researcher, an economist, all of this, multiple things, and he'd be able to speak to what DSS is doing and how they support this population as well. Turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Anthony. And it's a real privilege to be speaking in front of this group. I'll just introduce myself and I'll post some slides. I'm Guy Woolston. I work for the Department of Social Services. I oversee the Medicaid program for Connecticut. So I'm Connecticut's Medicaid director, also known as Husky. And I'm going to spend a couple of minutes telling you about what Husky is, how it helps prepare people for work, and also some of the investments that Husky makes to try to help the next generation of Connecticut residents be ready and able to enter the workforce. And I'm going to focus, some of the information is going to be general, but then I'll also tailor it a little bit to our members who have disabilities. So I'll just pop up from my slides. 1 second. Great. I just want to confirm, am I sharing?
Yep, I can see the full screen now.
Terrific, great. Okay, so I thought I'd start with a really high level overview on Husky, that is Connecticut's Medicaid program. So we cover approximately 1 million people in every town in the state of Connecticut. We cover 1 in 6 adults, 1 in 3 children, plus 4 in 10 births, 2/3 of nursing home residents, 3 in 8 individuals with disabilities, and in 1 in 4 people who have Medicare benefits. So it is a wide-ranging program that touches the lives of friends and family all across the state and in every part of our community. Just a little bit on what Medicaid is, because for those of us who aren't in the healthcare world, it can be a little bit confusing. So I wanted to contrast Medicare from. So Medicare is a federal program that provides basic health insurance for people over age 65, and also after 2-year waiting people who have been determined to have a qualifying disability. Medicare focuses primarily on that kind of the foundations of health insurance, hospitals, services, doctor's visits, prescription drugs. It has much more limited coverage for behavioral health and has little or no coverage from long-term services and supports and dental care. And it's funded through payroll taxes and cost sharing. Medicaid, the program that I oversee, also known as Husky, is a joint federal-state partnership. It's administered by the state, by me and colleagues. But it's subject to federal rules. In terms of what it is, it's expanded health coverage for low-income individuals and families, as well as the elderly, people who are blind, those living with disabilities. And it's comprehensive in terms of its benefits. It covers medical, behavioral health, dental, long-term services and supports, and plays an especially important role for our members who live with disabilities, especially those who live in the community. And it's jointly funded between the federal and the state government. So that's what I do. I wake up every day trying to think about how to have this slice of the pie work better for our members and for the state of Connecticut. I'm not going to go through every word in the slide. Just the message is Husky Medicaid means test program. So depending on what group you fall in, your age and your disability status and things like that, and depending on your income, you may or may not qualify for Medicaid Husky. One message I would give to employers, to state the hook to this really important topic. If I'm an employer thinking about hiring someone part-time, it can be really helpful that they show up to work healthy and prepared to do their job. And health insurance is a really important piece of the puzzle for getting people to be able to show up and work. And I guess the message I would give to employers here is Husky plays a really important role for people with disabilities. And moreover, if you have workforce that you're only employing part-time, so you're not giving health insurance to, encourage them to apply. We have a number of programs. We have Husky, we have covered Connecticut, we have the qualified health plans, the Obamacare plans. There's a lot of support for people with lower incomes, and our team can help your employees figure out which plans you may qualify for. We don't make it always as easy as possible to navigate. So go to Access Health, and there's a phone number there, and there's a website. We can help you figure out what programs you might be eligible for. I just want to spend a minute longer just on what Medicaid covers before touching on the research on how health insurance in general and Medicaid in particular prepares people for work. As I mentioned, Medicaid is pretty comprehensive in the set of packages that it gives, and that might be especially important for our members with disabilities. There are a set of mandatory services that the federal government says we must cover. And these include things like hospital care and outpatient and nursing facilities. There are also optional services that the state chooses to cover. And I'm proud to say that Connecticut in general has a pretty comprehensive Husky program. These are things like prescription drugs, dental, hospice, personal care, care management, home and community-based services. In general, our program is a leader in how comprehensive the nature of our benefits are, and especially for our members who are living with disabilities, some of those kind of optional services can really make the difference between being happy, productive, and healthy and not. And so I'm really happy to emphasize how comprehensive the package is. Just have 3 more slides. I'm going to spend 2 slides just on the research, especially thinking about being ready for work and employment. I'm going to have 1 slide on kids and another slide on adults. There is really good research that shows that investing in health insurance coverage for children is good public policy. And we know this because in a variety of ways, Medicaid programs expand coverage, and they often do so in ways that create natural experiments where we can follow Medicaid beneficiaries over time and look at outcomes 10, 20, 30 years later compared to otherwise identical people who are not eligible for Medicaid. And that research shows that covering children, giving them health insurance 10, 20, 30 years later causes better outcomes. Things like being more likely to go to college, earning more money, paying more taxes, lower hospitalizations, lower rates of obesity, and lower rates of having children before the age of 21. I think this research is really compelling, and the National Bureau of Economic Research has a recent study that shows that for every $1 we invest in healthcare for children, it pays for itself and then some, with all of these benefits outlined here. That was for children. On the adult side, there's a lot of good research suggesting that giving health insurance to adults can improve health outcomes, things like mortality, and also non-health outcomes, things like bankruptcy. I won't go through all of the papers in detail here because I know, Anthony, we're running a little bit short on time. But I guess the conclusion I'll share is that in looking at Medicaid expansion, looking at getting coverage, looking at Medicare, I think there's pretty good research that suggests that having the type of health insurance that Medicaid provides leads to better, more productive, happy citizens that probably also make for better employees. And I think if you're an employer thinking about how to tap into the talent of Connecticut residents who are living with disabilities, knowing that Husky exists and can help be a piece of the puzzle, I think is really important. My last slide, I'll just touch on some of the services that we provide that might be of special interest to some of our members with disabilities. This is in no way a comprehensive list, but we provide pretty extensive home health care for people, for older adults and individuals with disabilities who want to live at home, live in the rather than in an institutional setting. Connecticut has been a real leader with our DDS partners and others in helping ensure that people have the option of staying at home if they want to. And that's including the kind of self-direction of services. And we also help people transition from institutional settings to the community through programs like Money Follows the Person. Anyway, that's just a little thumbnail sketch of the Husky program. I think the reason that Anthony asked me to come speak for this audience is the tie-in for employers knowing that Husky exists, and is that pair of hands to help make your employees be ready for work, and then also just the tie-in, particularly with children, the investment that we make helps get people ready for school, ready for work, ready for the labor force. So happy to answer questions in the chat, and thank you so much for inviting me to present here.
Thank you, Guy. I was learning a lot myself just now. I really appreciate your presentation. I don't know if anyone else was taking notes, but I was taking notes. Great presentation. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Sinia, who's been doing some phenomenal work for over 16 plus years at Walgreens, and I'm looking forward to his presentation. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Great, thanks, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I'm gonna pull up my presentation here. All right. Can you guys see that?
Yes, I see. Yep, I do.
I'm trying to put it into presentation mode there. Let me see if I can do this.
At the bottom, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. Been doing this for a while. You'd think I would learn, but so I apologize. But it's nice to be here with you guys. I'm Mark Senya. I'm the field inclusion manager for Walgreens. So pretty much what I do is oversee all of our programs across the country for people with disabilities. I manage a team of 4 that cover 4 areas for us across the country, where we are bringing people with disabilities through, putting them through a training program, and then if they meet our qualifications and hit the criteria, we are moving them to hire. I started in our distribution center about 15 years ago, our distribution center that's located in Windsor, Connecticut, and have kind of grown in my position throughout the company. But I will say, not just because there are people here from the state on, but Connecticut is traditionally one of the better states to partner with and work with. Dave and the BRS team have been great partners of ours in gaining referrals for our program. So I'll start with quickly just kind of our journey and where we've been. It all kind of kicked off for us when our senior vice president of distribution and logistics had a son with autism and felt like he wanted to do something for his son. Long story short, he was presented some opportunities within the company, but his son ended up quitting his job. But he felt like, hey, if I can do this for my son, I have to be able to do this for everyone. So that's really where we started our journey in 2007. We had a distribution center that launched in Anderson, South Carolina. We had a commitment to hire 1/3 of our workforce of people with disabilities. That's a building that has about 900 employees. So the goal was to get 300 employees of disabilities. Pretty aggressive goal. We achieved that goal. And then we said that we were going to do the same thing in the state of Connecticut when we took over a vacant tobacco field and put down a 770,000 square foot facility and made a commitment to hire 1/3 of our workforce of people with disabilities. And then, as you can see across the timeline, we went into the retail slide, which is our READY program. I'll touch on that on the next slide. and then kind of expanded across supply chain across the country. But South Carolina and what we call our Hartford distribution center, even though it's located in Windsor, have been two of our flagship buildings for sure on our journey of hiring people with disabilities. We've had such success that we did expand to supply chain, other distribution centers, and like I said, started a retail program as well. And then we have something that we are building across the country called micro fulfillment centers, where we do mass prescription fill. And we are going to start a program similar to our TWG, which is our distribution center. I'll touch on what TWG means. That's our transitional work group. That's our program that was designed to bring people on in our DCs. For our retail locations, we have the READY program, which is the Retail Employees with Disabilities Initiative. And then, like I said, we just started our micro fulfillment centers. We have about 3 sites up running, one in Arizona, one in Indianapolis, and a third one that will be starting in Mansfield, Massachusetts. But the programs I'm going to talk to you guys today and center on real quick are on READY and TWG. So first I'll start in the middle there with TWG, which really put us on the map. We have a program that is designed about 10 to 12 weeks. The best thing about this program is it's supported by a job coach and an agency. So we have a partnership within our 4 walls that are providing the training, the job coaching, and then of course our managers have a hand in it as well. There are evaluations for these individuals every 3 weeks, so they know where they stand. The evaluations are conducted by our partner agency job coach and also a Walgreens manager. And then, of course, on the final evaluation, if they're hitting the numbers that we need, we move them on to hire. The best piece about this program is the individuals that come through, the positions are budgeted in. So they start with a temp training wage. And then because it's within our budget, they don't go back into like a waiting pool or a candidacy pool. We move them straight on to hire. So they start with a temp training wage. They go right into their training. If they're successful, then we move them over. And the only thing that's going to change on that individual is going to be their hourly rate, which then they will be paid by Walgreens, which is an increase of $3 off the training wage. So there's some incentive there. This started, like I said, in Anderson, South Carolina, and then moved up to Windsor, Connecticut, and then across supply chain. But because of our success on the distribution center side, we started our READY program, which is our Retail Employee Disability Initiative, where we partner with partner agencies that supply job coaching. But on the READY side, we have more capability and flexibility to offer hours and different shifts. So the individual will have an evaluation. The program runs anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. READY started out as strictly as a training program. But just last year, actually the beginning of the year in January, we transitioned that program, not just from training, but training to placement, similar to TWG. So we're locating stores where we have opportunities to hire folks and implementing a training program in those stores where we have needs. So really trying to transition that program from not just training, but training to placement so we can gain those hires, right? In the past, we were just giving certificates and saying completion and really not doing the best capability on our end to offer positions. And I kind of scratched my head saying like, well, why are we going to give them a piece of paper where then they can take that to Target or that 3-letter store that I'm not going to mention, that's our biggest competitor. So I felt like we needed to change our approach, and we have been. So that's training to hire. So is the TWG. With TWG as well, we've gone to a more flexible working model. We are offering part-time as well now, where before it was pretty intense, 8 to 10-hour days working in the distribution center and only full-time availability. So we've done a good job of working with our operations team and designing more accommodating shifts for folks to come through on this program. Real quickly on the micro fulfillment center, even though there is no location in Connecticut, but kind of up the highway in Mansfield, Mass, we are setting up part-time and full-time positions where we have these sites that are doing mass prescription fill for our stores. So we're alleviating stress on our pharmacists, and the machines, it's all robotics. It's pretty impressive. It fills 800 scripts in an hour. But we need that human piece and that human element to stock and to run things and to pack trucks up. So we've just kicked off a program there, very similar to our TWG, like the distribution centers. And then the last piece I'll touch on is when we work with our partners, and we don't just pigeonhole people with disabilities to our training programs for employment opportunities. We do direct hires in all of our sites. So my team and I are always out there working with agencies, working with a lot of voc rehab agencies within states to find direct hires. What we have done and what we have promised throughout the years is we'll guarantee that individual with a disability an interview, but we will not guarantee the position. That they'll have to go through the interview process. But if it's somebody that we partner with and says that they have a person with a disability that wants to apply, we've made that commitment to offering the interview, and then hopefully it'll be a good fit and a win-win for everybody. So we do direct hires as well, and we promise that interview because we feel like it'll help the individual. It'll help our management team to always have that in the forefront, trying to be inclusive. They would brush up on their skills on interviewing people with disabilities. It's just something that we've always done when we opened our doors. One last piece that I'll mention is the programs are great, but it's truly about the people that really make it happen, right? I think we do a really good job of being an inclusive company. We offer disability awareness and etiquette to all our new hires. Our managers are always going through disability and inclusion trainings. We have a lot of education, and we rely on our partners as well to provide that education and awareness, so that we can continue to build that strong, inclusive culture, and grow as a company and move forward. I know that was a lot of information in a little bit of time, but Anthony, I appreciate you giving me the stage here and allowing me to speak in front of you guys today. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark. That's some phenomenal work that's being done. It seems like you guys are trailblazing when it comes to providing not also just opportunities, but really just to supportive services, but then also just the training that's really tied to this work. So I'll probably piece you on the back end. I'm assuming that might be some of the windmill training with DRS, but I think you guys are way ahead of the game. All right, thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Leslie Gomez, who's a local entrepreneur and also someone who's launched an amazing brand to support this population and also her son. So I'd like to pass it over and turn it over to Leslie.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. Let me just share my screen here and perfect. Can everybody see? Yep.
Yes.
So I'm introducing our brand Imperfect by Prop. It was inspired by my son, Jaden. But first, before I go into that, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a mom of two, a wife and a registered nurse of 20 years. In 2018, I left my registered nurse career and decided to become a full-time photographer. I opened my business, and it's now a thriving photography business. I am also an entrepreneur ×2, and this is where I not only launched my photography business, but decided to launch a brand that was inspired by my son, and I'm also an author. So everyone meet Jaden. Jaden, affectionately known as Pop, was born in 2004 at Hartford Hospital. And during that journey, through that 9 months, I had no idea that I was going to have a son that would have Down syndrome. So it was totally a surprise, totally devastating experience. And it painted, the physicians painted a very grim story at his birth, which changed the trajectory of everyone in the room. But because he, but throughout his life and him changing the narrative of what they thought that he would become, he inspired us to create Imperfect by Pop. So Imperfect by Pop, again, was founded in 2018, and our mission is to empower the imperfectly perfect community through motivational apparel and educate others to look beyond the label. This is when we started our online e-commerce store. And since then, eventually this brand was created for Jaden, but we decided that there are so many people like him that can benefit from this brand. So in 2022, and as Jaden got older and he had graduated from high school, a lot of concerns came up, like he's going to be 21 soon. What is next for Jaden? And Jaden is a very high functioning individual, very receptive, great with technology and all the things. So we are actually piloting a job skills program with the high school right now, where we have the children with disabilities and special ed come over to our space, and they do some job skill training and helping us to produce some of the gear and some apparel for themselves, and hoping to teach them some skills. We've been featured on Channel 61, Channel 8, NBC, and local radio stations. And now I want to kind of gear into some of the challenges that we've encountered as Jaden was growing up. So obviously, not obviously, but we experienced a lack of resources of him growing up in the educational system, which I feel like impacted that he could have been much more further along. And as we continue to raise Jaden, we got closer and closer to the time where he's going to be 21, and it starts to get concerning as parents with disabilities. What's going to happen after them? You know, with my daughter, she had a plan. She went to college. She's doing her career, participating in her career. But what is going to happen to Jaden after he's 21? He's currently 18 years old. So some of the challenges is finding opportunities that would push him to his full potential, or finding meaningful employment that would make him feel that he is contributing to the world. I sometimes feel like that people, they need to look beyond the label, and just because they have these labels, that they're not put in this basket and distributed to do work that the individuals are much more capable of doing. So they're giving them like minimal job opportunities, and I feel like they're not pushing to their full potential. So I also wanted to hone in that there are many individuals with intellectual disabilities that have, you know, silent powers, or whatever you want to call it, genius capabilities that have become a part of greatness. And I my husband and I, who are co-founders of this brand, want to change that narrative. So our vision, we initially started out as a e-commerce clothing brand to support and celebrate the human spirit of the imperfectly perfect community, but it's also expanding into a brand to support the IDD population to unlock their full potential in the labor force. So a part of our vision in the future is to secure a brick and mortar for imperfect BIPOC and employ meaningful opportunities for people with disabilities and meaningful wages to unlock their full potential. So this is our team of Imperfect. Is Carlos Gomez, my husband, who is the co-founder and creative director, myself, who is a co-founder in branding and marketing, and Jaden Gomez, who's the face and inspiration of Imperfect by Pop. Here is our contact information if anyone wants to reach out or have any questions. And if you have any questions, you can just put it in chat, I guess, or wait to the end so that I can answer it. Also, thank you for having me here today.
All right, thank you, Leslie. You know, I had the opportunity just to meet Pop too. I would say he's a sunshine. He's a sun. He's always very warm. He loves to dance, and he's an entertainer. But like Leslie shared, very often people are boxed into labels and not really given the full opportunity to maximize their full potential, which is what we commonly see with the IDD population. We know probably the richest man in the world identifies as an intellectual and development disability, which is Elon Musk, which we need to know that too as well. So there's plenty of genius, right? And we need to be able to untap everyone's full potential to be able to hit the ground running and give them equitable and inclusive opportunities in our labor force. So thank you again, Leslie. Lastly, I'd like to turn it over, last but not least, you know, Dave Dukas has been, and BRS has been one of our amazing partners here at OWS. So I'd like to turn it over to Dave Dukas to elaborate on some of the work that they're doing with career training and career pathways and so forth. It's all yours, Dave.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I have been struggling with some network bandwidth issues, so if my face should happen to freeze on the screen, I hope it does so in the most flattering portrait possible. It never seems to turn out that way. It would probably take me the whole afternoon to really give you guys a good overview of BRS and the scope of everything that happens within our program. So I'm going to really try to focus just on one aspect of what we do, and that is the development of workforce training pipeline programs. It's something we've been engaged with for a number of years. We've had a number of host employers that we've worked with. I'll highlight a few as my presentation goes on, but I do want to comment that it really began with Walgreens and their Windsor Distribution Center. So Mark, the roots of working with you guys go way back, and we continue to be very appreciative of our partnership with you and all the success we've mutually enjoyed. So in the broadest terms possible, the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services houses Connecticut's general vocational rehabilitation program. We work with people with all forms of disabilities, with the exception of those who have a primary disability of blindness. We have a sister program also housed within the Connecticut Department of Aging and Disability Services called the Bureau of Education and Services for the Blind. They operate a vocational program as well. What's really our mission? It's to empower individuals with disabilities to maximize their employment, economic self-sufficiency, independence, and inclusion and integration into society. As it relates to employment, I'm going to go back to Billy's presentation and reference the labor force participation rate. Our mission is to try to work with individuals with disabilities to maximize their vocational potential. It's also to inspire them to make the decision to pursue competitive integrated employment at all. We we are now reaching down to younger ages than ever before. We have been fortunate enough to be awarded a couple of grants recently through the U.S. Department of Education that allow us to operate outside of our normal regulations and reach down to kids as early as middle school ages and the schools that are working with them to begin the narrative, to begin the discussion about employment being possible for them someday. Over the next 5 years, we're going to be working across the state to try to develop curriculum, to try to work with school systems to get them to be able to spread the message that, yes, someday you can work. Just because you may have a disability doesn't mean that you should underestimate yourself or your potential in the future. We're also operating in reference to what Leslie just spoke about. A couple of years ago, we won a grant designed to help individuals, primarily those with intellectual disabilities, to make the decision to pursue competitive integrated employment. Through that grant, we've been doing an awful lot of work across the state and with a variety of partners to identify the barriers that get in the way of making that choice and the wraparound types of services and barriers that would prevent somebody from really being able to access and maintain competitive integrated employment. Those things fall a little bit outside of what our normal vocational rehabilitation program focuses on. And that's really helping individuals with disabilities acquire the skills necessary to obtain, maintain, and advance in competitive integrated employment. As a second customer inside of our program, it's the employers that will hopefully one day hire these individuals. For them, we provide training. Anthony just mentioned windmills training, which deals with the perceptions around disability and proper etiquette and really trying to dispel some of the myths around employing somebody with a disability, as well as other technical assistance. All this comes out of our vocational rehabilitation program, which is actually the oldest existing federal program in the United States. It goes back to World War I era and helping individuals with disabilities at that point who were injured on the job. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 that Billy spoke about earlier really changed the landscape of the program, the voc rehab program nationally, and untied our hands, allowed us to work with a wider variety of individuals. As he mentioned, it changed the approach from a more medical model to a more socially driven model that is one that seeks full inclusion and access to all of the society's opportunity and benefit for individuals with disabilities. And that's the kind of the root legislation that supports our program. The voc rehab program exists in every state in the country. It's about a $4 billion year program nationwide. And it's one that all of us who work in are very proud of. Also underneath the BRS umbrella, very quickly, are a few other federal and state programs. There's one that focuses on providing access to assistive technology. Another that helps with independent living. We have a program to help individuals with disabilities train on driving. We have a benefit counseling program. I saw that referenced in the chat earlier. And we have benefit counselors that will work individually with people who are considering or are about to start employment to help them do an individualized analysis of their benefits and what would work and earnings mean for those benefits. Helps them navigate the very complicated benefit picture. And I'll mention that helps with even things like disallowing some income through impairment-related work expenses, which can help reduce the amount of income someone's showing that's going to be factored into their benefit calculation for them, a calculation for them to be able to maintain their benefits. So we have some really knowledgeable and highly skilled people working in that program. We provide services specifically for people who are deaf and hearing impaired, as well as also operating a workers' rehabilitation program for people injured on the job. BRS is part of the and voc rehab program is part of the workforce system. We work very closely with the American Job Centers and the workforce development boards. We have a very collegial relationship with them, relying upon one another to provide the best services possible for individuals with disabilities. One of those things that we've been working very intently with and have invested a lot in BRS is to try to work with the workforce development boards, OWS, and other entities that are developing career pathway programs, and trying to deal with screening criteria that may impact an individual's ability to access programs because of screening mechanisms that may unfairly factor them out. Really trying to create the right supports around these programs so people who do engage in them are able to be successful. We work hard to understand prerequisite skill needs and to develop people's skills so that they can be successful when entering these programs. As I mentioned before, partnership with business is very, very important to us. And we work very hard to help businesses of all sizes and industries build an inclusive workforce. In order to do that, I'm going to skip to my next slide because we're short on time. We kind of engage in an assessment of the business itself. We try to understand how they go about their normal recruiting, what their onboarding of new employees looks like, what kind of post-inductive training is provided to them, what is their pipeline for refilling vacancies and dealing with attrition in their particular industry, what type of workplace accessibility and technology do they have available to them and currently implemented so that we can help build upon that and make the workplace in general more inclusive. As part of that, we can also offer different financial incentives to try out potential employees. We offer things like on-the-job training, trial work experiences, paid internships and apprenticeships and things of that nature. One of the other really important things that we do is the development of industry-specific training programs. And that's where we got started with Walgreens. And over the years, we've had, I would say, upwards of 20 different host employers. Right now, we have about 9 of them that are very active with us. We have, I won't go through the details of each of these, but we have ongoing relationships with Mohegan Sun, Wyndham Hotels, Advance Auto up in Enfield, both the Walgreens retail and distribution centers. We have Launch IT, which is a web design business, and we also offer a digital accessibility training hosted by Western Connecticut State University that will help educate people on how to make our documents and other forms of soft media accessible. United Health Group is another partner with us, as well as Travelers. These types of programs will start out often very small, and we evolve them to meet the needs of the business. The real purpose behind this is to train people to work inside of their business or their industry. So we'll work with the host employer, bring in an outside training entity through one of our community rehabilitation providers to deliver training inside of the host employer's facility and prepare them to work right inside their business. And if there is not an opportunity for them to get hired by that business, provide them with the experience and skills necessary to go to another comparable type of business to seek employment. It's been one of our more successful models. All the training is very much customized to their particular industry. We have a number of host employers that we're working with now to try to develop these types of opportunities. And I think there's plenty more out there that if they are willing to develop a workforce and allow people with disabilities to learn about working in their industry and to give them an opportunity, we're more than willing to help them build it out. We bring along a lot of expertise and resources in that area. And again, we've been very highly successful in that service. What do we need to do in order to make that happen? Well, as I mentioned, we have to establish what the current and future workforce needs of that particular business is. We work with them to develop a training plan and what will prepare people to work most effectively in their business. We implement that training and we continue to evaluate and sustain it through the referral of our consumers into those programs. The people that we're referring, whether it be through to one of our training programs that we're working directly with, or any of the career pathway programs available through Career Connect or through the workforce development boards, we screen individuals very carefully. We look at, number one, the impact of their disability on their vocational goals. We have all of our counselors that work with these individuals, and we have about 75 counselors statewide, and they're scattered across the 15 permanent locations and we also have people embedded inside of the workforce development boards, are all master's level people with specific qualifications of working with individuals with disabilities related to vocational pursuit. So we screen people very carefully to determine that the goals that they're setting for themselves and the programs that they're entering are appropriate for them. We follow people along, we provide them ongoing counseling and any other services that may be necessary to help them be successful. Part of our screening includes the use of tools like the World of Work inventory. Conover has an outstanding product that we use to evaluate people's level of aptitude and so forth, and many other tools of this nature. As I mentioned, we kind of developed a curriculum based upon the need of the employer and what it will take to prepare someone. So we don't have any cookie cutter type of approach. We really customize it to what's necessary for the business. Some training programs are time-based, where a certain number of hours of practice are required. Others are competency-based, where certain skill sets need to be acquired, and some are a hybrid of both. The key word here is customization. Training is often delivered either on the floor in an on-the-job learning type of way. We train people, to be hands-on and learn through structured work setting. We do classroom training for some. We try to build in mentorship. Natural supports on the job and work environments are often proved very important. So we try to facilitate that as much as possible. And when possible, we will generate a credential that offers portability for the individual they could take with them and add to their resume as they move along. We're demand driven. We look to fill the needs of business. And that's really the key to this. As I mentioned earlier, there are two customers: the consumer we're trying to help get a job, and the business that we're trying to fill a need. We leverage our resources as much as we possibly can. It's great to talk about our potential. It's great to talk about the scope of what we can do, but our finances, can be limited. We're well funded at this point, but it would be unrealistic to say that we could serve every individual with a disability who's looking for employment. So with that in mind, we partner as much as we can with other existing programs to try to make our dollars go as far as we can. I think that the slogan of National Disability Employment Awareness Month really rings home for us in BRS, in that advancing access and equity is really what we're about. We try to help individuals with disabilities get access to everything they need to access to be successful. And we certainly believe in universal design and trying to provide equity and a fair opportunity for an individual with disabilities to prove themselves, to access their capabilities, much like Leslie talked about. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to give you a very brief overview, and I'm always happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for sharing. You guys have always been a great partner, and I appreciate the partnership. I know we've got about a minute, but I think there was one good question. I mean, there's multiple questions, but I think there's one in the chat before we close out. And this might be for you, Mark, if you're still there too. There was a question. Is the ready opportunity, does it apply to workers ages 16 to 18? I think that was a big question. I think most people are very interested in that opportunity.
Yeah, it's of working age. So yes, we can accommodate. We can certainly do something there. I can put my contact information in the chat, and if anyone has more questions on that, I can certainly connect with them.
Yeah. And Mark, I don't know if these slides or anyone else, if the slides are able to be shared, but this presentation will be uploaded online too as well on our Governor's Workforce Council DEIA section. You'll be able to find this meeting uploaded, but hopefully we'll be able to share some of these slides out if anyone's ever interested in learning more or having it. All right, so just thank you, everyone. And then I'll probably just, I really, truly appreciate all the panelists and everyone that's really speaking. I think it was a really, well put together, a lot of information, a lot of things that I was actually, learning. I really, truly appreciated the wonderful presentation from everyone. And, but thank you for everyone. And then also thank you for everyone who's here attending and listening. It's been a collective approach of many stakeholders that's been very committed, and a lot of volunteers that's really committed to removing barriers and creating equitable and inclusive opportunities where everyone feels a sense of belonging and engagement in our state's labor force. So I'll turn it over to Jay, who's been a phenomenal chair for multiple years now since I've been on board. So I'll turn it over to Jay just to close us out. All right.
Again, I'll just add my thanks to Anthony, you and Billy and the staff, the entirety of the staff. You all do the heavy lifting and put the agendas together. That is, again, easy for me to follow, but more importantly, facilitates discussion and presentation from all of the members of the committee and the guests and the experts. So thank you all. Continue to stay well. Thank you specifically for sharing your stories, both personally and professionally. The comments reflected how inspiring and gratifying these stories are, and helping to encourage us and affirm the work that is being done, and also reminding us to be very humble for the communities that we serve. So thank you all. Stay well until we convene again. We appreciate it.
Thank you.